Good evening, everyone, and welcome to an Oz Cyclone Chasers update. My name is Chris Nitzo. Tonight is the 26th of January 2014. First of all, let me tell you, we have not put our team into the next phase, which is our planning phase for a cyclone chase. We remain on alert. The simple fact of the reason why we haven't pushed into the next phase of our journey is because we are still not 100 or close to 100% certain that this system will make landfall. So there is still some guidance, particularly the guidance that came out this morning, which had the system lingering off the coast of Queensland. Tonight's guidance suggests, once again, just like last night's guidance, a lot higher percentage chance of it actually making landfall. So once again, we need to see a trend where the model guidance for a couple of days in a row suggests a coastal crossing, and then we will push ourselves into the planning phase. The planning phase requires us to make sure that we have accommodation, we have all our safety gear ready to go, and that we do a number of different checklists to make sure that our cyclone chase is as safe as possible. Alright folks, tonight we're going to talk mostly about the Queensland system. We'll give the WA system a minute or two at the end because it's not there's nothing much happening with that at the moment. There may be something happening with it a bit later on today. So WA folks, instead of sitting through the entire Queensland bit, fast forward this video to the last few minutes, and that's where we'll talk about the WA system. Let's get into it. So if we look at northwestern Australia here, we've got a lot of thunderstorm activity associated with that tropical low, or the very, very weak tropical low that's starting to push into the West Kimberley at the moment. That'll eventually push off the coast, and it'll eventually push in a westerly direction, remaining well offshore of the Pilbara coastline. So therefore the amount of rain that it's going to deliver in the Pilbara coastline looks to be minimised because of that. We'll talk a bit more about that at the end of the broadcast. Looking further to the east, we've got good thunderstorm activity developing over the top end region and basically most of the Northern Territory, most of the northern half of the Northern Territory. But here's where the action is, folks, as we head towards the eastern half of Australia. We see a trough system in through here, central Queensland. We see a lot of rain, shower and storm activity throughout central and northern parts of Queensland, and we see a monsoon trough very, very clearly on the satellite imagery up here in the Peninsula region. Now if we push a little bit further to the east, we start to see a bit of rotation out here, believe it or not, and we see it in the last few frames especially. The system is starting to rotate. The tropical low is starting to rotate up here in the far northern Coral Sea. It has a very nice outflow channel here to the south, and so we expect it to continue to push in a west to southwest direction over the next couple of days and develop further over that period. Now by Wednesday, the Bureau of Meteorology believe this will be a tropical cyclone, and there's some fair guidance that that suggests this a very similar time frame in terms of its development. So as it tracks in a west to southwest direction, it gets a lot closer to the Queensland coast. Then what it does after about Wednesday is really up in the air, because there's a couple of different steering mechanisms which we'll talk about that are going to impact the system. Now how much each of those impact the system will determine what part of the coastline this particular thing hits, if indeed it hits any part of the coastline. So there is still some guidance that keeps it just off the coast. Close enough to the coast, of course, to give a lot of wind, so a lot of gale force winds to the south, particularly of the system, and possibly even some fairly decent rainfalls to the south of the system if it remains offshore. Obviously, though, the favoured scenario from most of the model guidance is that it does push onshore and it does hit the coast. It's just a matter of, I guess, we need to see a trend and consistency in that guidance now. We don't want another situation where we had yesterday the models were suggesting it was going to hit the coast, yet this morning they were suggesting it was going to lie just off the coast, yet this evening they're re-suggesting a coastal crossing again. So we do need to be a bit more, we do need to have a little bit more certainty in that model guidance, and we do need to see it trending a particular way for a couple of runs. So here's the Bureau of Meteorology's official one. Monday, we're looking at a 5 to 20% chance of it forming into a cyclone, moderate by Tuesday, 20 to 50%, high by Wednesday, and really by Thursday it should be a TC. Alright, so let's get into some of the guidance. So if we look at the potential for a tropical cyclone to form in the next 2 days, we start to see a lot of ingredients coming together here to the south of the southwest of the Solomon Islands, up here in the northern Coral Sea. That's where the ingredients are really starting to come together for tropical cyclone development. We see this area here off the West Kimberley coastline isn't really favourable. There are some ingredients there that are favourable, but most aren't. So it's this area here we're going to focus on, this area here that everyone's interested in at the moment. The interesting area right here lies in an area of very, very low vertical wind shear, so about 10 to 15 meters per second in terms of vertical wind shear is pretty favorable for development of a tropical cyclone, and it's expected to remain favorable for the next 2 days as the system tracks into this region here. So we are expecting favorable wind shear conditions. If we look at the sea surface temperatures in the region, we've basically got temperatures of 28 to 30 degrees throughout this entire area, so no issue whatsoever with sea surface temperatures being warm enough. If we look at the amount of vorticity or spin in the lower levels of the atmosphere, it's important that we look at this particular value because in the atmosphere, the more spin we have, the more chance of low pressure forming in that area of spin there is. So what we see here is just a broad area of spin or vorticity right across the northern Coral Sea up to the top end. This is all associated with the monsoon trough, but you can see here an area of enhanced spin or enhanced vorticity in the lower levels. This is the favoured area for the tropical low to track into and tropical low to form into, I should say. So this enhanced area of spin in the atmosphere, in meteorology, spin at the surface creates low pressure at the surface, and therefore we have this is the favoured area for that low pressure region. So the first model we'll take a look at is the Bureau of Meteorology's Access R model, thanks to WeatherZone for the weather graphics. So you can find them at weatherzone.com.au. They provide a great service for those of you who are interested in more than just basic weather information from the BOM. These guys provide a great service. WeatherZone's chart here, or the Access R chart here, shows the tropical low this morning, located in the far northeastern Coral Sea. We see that by tomorrow morning the system pushes in a westerly or west-southwesterly direction. Still very broad, still very monsoonal. We can see a lot of rain starting to hit the coast here by Tuesday morning, overnight, Monday and into Tuesday morning. We see rainfalls of 20 plus millimetres all along the central coast and grading up to 100 plus millimetres in the north tropical coast as the system tracks. Once again, it doesn't really form into anything significant here at 48 hours, and then 72 hours we see a very similar type of track to the west-southwest. Now look, this is the outlying model. Most of the model guidance pushes it a lot further south than this, but I thought it might be an idea to show you the more northerly model solution. The reason, can I just say, the reason the particular model has this system moving more to the north than the other model guidances is the fact that it remains quite a shallow tropical low or a monsoonal low. And therefore is steered by a different level in the atmosphere. So this one is steered by a level sort of between 1.5 to 3 kilometers up in the atmosphere, as opposed to the other models which develop a much stronger type, deeper system, and therefore the system is steered more by the 3 to 5 kilometer level in the atmosphere. So because of that difference is why we're seeing this track a little bit more north than the other tracks. The daddy version of this model, which is the Access G model from the Bureau of Meteorology, is a much lower resolution model, but it uses, I guess they're very tied in because they use the same physics set. So if you look at the Access G model, at 4 days time, you've got a system located just off the east coast near Cairns. At day 5, it pushes onshore somewhere between Cairns and Townsville. Because the model is so low resolution, it's very difficult to pinpoint an actual crossing point with this. But once again, you can really see what I'm talking about in a lot of our Facebook social media updates, where we talk about the heaviest rain being to the south of the system. Even a coarse model like the Access G can pick up on that. You can see here very, very heavy rainfalls to the south, and also the tightly packed isobars to the south show that this is where all the strongest winds are. Another model solution that we don't tend to look too much at is the NavGem model solution. So you can see here at 72 hours we have a tropical low located off the coast of Cooktown. At 84 hours it really sort of hits Princess Charlotte Bay. 96 hours it becomes a broad low, and then just becomes, that low just tracks basically right down the coast here, and by 144 hours located around the Cairns area. Look, this is another coarse resolution model, so it's like the Bureau of Meteorology's Access G. It really does struggle with these things, so don't pay too much attention to this particular model. But we need to show it to you just as an outlying model. So this is the CMC model, another one that's not very accurate, but it is showing an easterly solution. So once again, if we're showing you all the outliers to show you all the different possibilities, grading from the improbable, which are these ones, to the more likely, which are going to be the ones I'm about to show you, but it's important we cover all options. So 72 hours, we see it out here, well out here in the central Coral Sea. Look, it's too far south and too far east at that point in time, we believe anyway. As we head to 96 hours, it continues to push southeast. Now, this model has a tendency of overdeveloping tropical convection into tropical cyclones, and so therefore it's struggling to maintain, or struggling now with which circulation becomes dominant. So once we get to Thursday, the model is really off its chops, and it's really not worth looking at anymore. Alright, so I've shown you the models we don't consider are going to be real accurate. So we're going to show you now the models we think are going to be a lot more accurate. So this is now the UK Met model. The UK Met model comes in at number 2 in the world overall, and we see that the system out here lies in the northern Coral Sea, pushing in a westerly direction up until around about Tuesday night to Wednesday morning. Now, Wednesday morning, something significant happens, and we'll talk about that shortly when I show you the European solution. Wednesday morning, it starts to push in a more southerly direction just off the coast, and as we head to Thursday morning, it's located a fair way off the north tropical coastline, or the tropical coastline, basically to the east of about Innisfail or Ingham, Innisfail to Ingham region. So we see the system there as a Category 1 TC. Now, from there, the extended range UK Met model then has it tracking, west to west southwest direction straight back onto the coast. But the guidance out here visually won't go that far, and we're not allowed to show you the guidance that will. So as we start looking now at the ensemble guidance, we see that by Wednesday morning, we see the tropical low, according to the GFS ensemble, lying somewhere in here in the northern or central Coral Sea. Now, there's a fairly wide variance here in the model data from the GFS ensemble. Not quite as large variance in the European model ensemble. So at this point in time, the GFS model is a little bit all over the shop with where this low is going to be. Overall, though, we're suggesting it's going to be out here in the northern Coral Sea. Now, as we track further towards the Wednesday afternoon to Wednesday night period, we see the both sort of areas that are interesting for us are pushing in a southerly direction, and we see that continuing through to Thursday, where by Thursday we at this stage are still likely to have the system located just offshore, but you can see some yellow colouring around the coast near Cairns, and also some yellow colouring way out in the central Coral Sea. So there is a fair amount of variability there. That means that the cyclone may have crossed the coast by Thursday morning to the just to the south of Cairns, or it could still be located well offshore in the central Coral Sea. So there's still a lot of variability in the GFS model, and then as we head towards Thursday, if the cyclone hasn't crossed the coast, it's probably unlikely, as we head to Thursday night, if the cyclone didn't cross the coast by then, the GFS model starts to believe that it may not cross at all. And so this is why we have a large doubt or area of doubt in our minds as to whether it will cross the coast or not. So by the 120 hour mark, we see that the system is likely to be either located on the coast and heading inland. Sorry, that was the model playing some silly buggers with me. On the coast heading inland, or it's likely to be located off the coast and not going to hit the coast by Friday. So there is a lot of variability in that model still. But the European has started to get a little bit more confident in its track forecast. So this is the Euro now that you're looking at, and the Euro is the most accurate model in the world. Now this is its ensemble, and its ensemble believes that on the Wednesday morning we could be most likely to be seeing the low in this area. But if we also look at the lighter shading just to the west of that, we could actually be seeing the low located very, very close to the coast by Wednesday morning, according to the Euro ensemble. Then as we head towards Thursday morning, we see that the low has deepened overall to 1,000 2,000 hectopascals average, but we can see here the guidance and the variability in the guidance is starting to become a little bit more compact compared to yesterday, and we see that by Thursday morning it may have made landfall anywhere to the anywhere around Cairns southwards to around Townsville, or it could still be most likely located just offshore. Now, if it's located in this region, obviously gale force winds, heavy rain, all sorts of goodies weather-wise will be happening along the north tropical, and central coast of Queensland. So that's very confident guidance in terms of what we've had so far, but it's still below average in terms of confidence what we would expect at the model at 4 days. Normally this model at 4 days shows very little variation. Here at 4 days we see quite a large variation still, not as large as yesterday, but still reasonably large, so we can't be fully confident of a landfall yet. And by Friday, we see quite a large variability in the model guidance because we see that the system may have already made landfall and started tracking westwards towards the Gulf of Carpentaria, or the system may lie just offshore here off the Herbert and Lower Burdekin coastline, or the northern parts of the or the Whitsundays region, in fact. So this is quite now a large variability in the model guidance, and some of the guidance, as I said, has already hit the coast and is pushing it west at a great rate of knots towards the Gulf. Similar situation though to the GFS, that by Saturday morning, if the model is saying that if this thing has not hit land by Saturday morning, it becomes less likely to do so, and we start to see the trend of the model is to push the low, or whatever's left of it, out here to the central Coral Sea. So it is very important that if the system is going to cross, it does so probably by about Saturday morning. Otherwise, the guidance is suggesting that other factors come into play in the longer term, which will make landfall quite difficult after Saturday morning. And then as we extend that further, as we head to Sunday morning, we see that by Sunday morning it's almost got no chance of landfall. It's pushed way out here to the east again. But as I say, this could be a null and void point because the system may have already crossed by about Thursday based on the current guidance. On our social media, a lot of people have been wondering why the hell they've been getting gale force winds, and once again, can we restate the reason you're getting gale force winds, particularly on the central coast, anywhere from about Mackay southwards, is not because of the tropical low. It is actually because, indirectly I guess you can attribute it to that, but directly it's because of a pressure gradient squeeze. So these winds are squeezing between a high that's located in the Tasman and the tropical low located up here. They create a pressure gradient for squeeze. And in that squeeze you get these really strong winds coming in from the southeast. So nothing to do with a cyclone at all, but yes, they are getting up to gale force winds occasionally through the period. So what we're going to do here is we're going to track it and have a look at these wind strengths as we head through the forecast period. We're looking now at Monday morning at 10 a.m. Queensland time. You can see here by Monday afternoon we still have these gales, but they extend further to the north as far as Townsville offshore at least, and we see the tropical low here starting to develop a bit more wind to its north. Tuesday morning we continue to see probably an easing of the gale force winds around the coastline, more into the strong wind warning level, but we see an increase in northwesterly flow from at the northern edge of the low. So we do start to see that low is intensifying on the Tuesday, and by Tuesday night we start to see the potential for it to be named a tropical cyclone. Still a little too broad for my liking to be really classic TC just yet, but as we head towards Wednesday it fixes that gets fixed, and we see that by Wednesday morning the system is starting to really adopt gales on both quadrants, the northern and southern quadrants, northern and southern semicircles, and you can definitely see that by Wednesday night the system is a tropical cyclone approaching the Queensland coast. Now importantly, it's important for us to note that being that close to the coast at that point in time, we are starting to see some pretty heavy rain on the Wednesday, Thursday, just starting to impinge onto the coast, and then as the system tracks a little closer to the coast or in a more southerly direction, you actually see this rainfall starting to hit the coastline, just the outer edge rain bands of the system starting to hit the coastline. Once again, we're starting to see gales there by Thursday night, really impacting the coastline here, particularly in the central coast. Anywhere to the south of the system is where the strongest gales are going to be, on the coastline at least. Still getting some strong winds offshore or heading offshore in the Townsville to Cairns area, but really the gale force force winds are south of the system, the really intense stuff. And then as we head towards Friday, we see the system. Now this is where we're not sure. Will it make landfall? Will it not? We're not sure if by Friday it's still going to be out here. Remember, there is still guidance that suggests it's going to hit between Cairns and Townsville, so there is that guidance there. And if it does that, it's going to hit earlier than Friday. So it's going to hit on Thursday if it's going to hit up here. If it's going to hit down here, it's going to hit more likely around the Friday region. If it remains offshore by Saturday, it's likely to remain offshore for good. So it's not likely to make landfall. And that's the key here. We have a lot of different steering factors in play. So this particular model guidance tonight says that it's going to hit around that Proserpine region, Airlie Beach area late on the Friday night. Now, that's important to note, though. There's going to be a very interesting interaction with with an upper level system on the Wednesday, and that interaction is going to be all important in determining whether this system will actually make landfall or will it stay off the coast. So if we go to Wednesday morning, we can see that there's an upper level trough just on the edge of your screen, the bottom right of your screen. That upper level trough is going to try and push the system in a southeast direction. Unfortunately, or fortunately, whichever way you want to look at it, it may not have the amplitude, or what we call amplitude, which means it may not be able to jut northwards enough to pick the system up. And if it doesn't do that, we have an upper level high in the central part or southeastern part of Australia that's going to try and push it in a southwest direction or a westerly direction. So overall, there's two different steering factors in play. We got one trying to push it southeast, one trying to push it westerly in a westerly direction. So one of them will win out, but they won't win out completely, and so it won't push in either direction. It'll push somewhere in between, and that's why we're expecting a more south to southwest direction as it approaches landfall, as opposed to a direct west track. Now remember, if the system remains a little bit weaker, as the access models were showing, we expect landfall to be a long way further to the north. But you can see here the upper level trough just misses it, and the system then tracks in a southwest direction towards the coastline. And so therefore, that's the latest we have on this particular system, folks, and that's where we'll leave it for now with the Queensland system. The tropical low that's near the West Kimberley coastline is not expected to deepen. It's expected to weaken. It's not expected to develop into a tropical cyclone. But next weekend, we do expect a tropical low to form and possibly further develop into a potential TC as next week progresses. And let's have a quick look at guidance on that. So here's our tropical low on Thursday. It's really broad and it's really washed out here over the Pilbara region. But some of the model members by Friday morning do start to intensify the low if it's located here off the coast of the Karratha-Onslow area. So it needs to be located offshore. If it is located offshore, some of the model guidance just intensify the low a little bit on the Friday. Then by Saturday, they continue to show, some guidance continues to show the development of that low into a little bit more significant. Look, they're not overly enthusiastic about forming this into a cyclone, but there is just the hint of it happening as we head towards Saturday. The system tracks a little bit further to the west, so this is the most likely area that the system will be located in. And then interestingly, by Sunday, we do start to see some of the guidance really forming this into possibly a very weak tropical cyclone well to the northwest of Barrow Island, pushing in a westerly direction still at that point in time. So there is just the hint there of something trying to get itself going as we head into the weekend. Now, we'll talk more about that as we head closer to the weekend, but at this point in time, our thoughts and our attention is firmly planted on the East Queensland coast. And at this stage, I have to say, it looks that if this does develop into a tropical cyclone, it may not impact the actual coastline, possibly not even impact Barrow too much, but it is still too early to tell for certain, and we will keep monitoring model guidance here. So as we look briefly at rainfall across Australia tomorrow, we're going to see a continuation of some very good shower activity from about Townsville northwards on the wet tropics coastline of Queensland. We're also going to see a little bit more activity around the central coast, around the Mackay area, so some good shower activity there. Also, the Western Cape York Peninsula and Northern Cape York Peninsula seeing a good convergent flow. We're going to see showers and storms in the Gulf country of Queensland and the Northern Territory. We're going to see central parts of the Northern Territory receiving some good rain as well. Top end coast still receiving some good monsoonal activity, and just some isolated showers and storms throughout the Kimberley Pilbara region and into central and interior parts of WA. On Tuesday, we see an increase in rainfall, further increase in rainfall on the northeastern Queensland coast, anywhere sort of about Innisfail northwards or Ingham northwards. And we also see continuation of that shower activity along the central coast. There are going to be some very isolated showers throughout the Queensland coastline, but most of the heavy stuff will be on the exposed coastlines. And also the once again, it's almost really a carbon copy. I might be repeating myself here. The far northern parts of the peninsula, northern top-end coastline, even the western top-end coastline receiving a bit more activity here, and the Kimberley region also getting a little bit more active. Also looking at possibly some widespread shower and storm activity over the Pilbara and Gascoyne region, West Pilbara and Gascoyne region. As we head to Wednesday, we see some very intense rainfall. Now, look, this is all dependent, obviously, on the tropical cyclone in Queensland as to where this rainfall goes and how close that cyclone gets. Now, if it gets very close, we're going to see massive amounts of rainfall here. If it stays offshore, we're going to see fairly low rainfall amounts here. The northern parts of the peninsula, though, are going to continue to see some very heavy rain, and also going to see an increase generally in the Kimberley and western top end of monsoonal showers and storms. On Thursday, once again, remembering it all depends here in Queensland on the tropical cyclone. But over the far northern peninsula, we're going to continue to see activity. That monsoon is just raging, and it's going to continue raging for the foreseeable future. So it's great news for these guys. It hasn't stopped raining for them for over a week at the moment, and we're not talking pitter-patter rain. We're talking some serious rain up there. And also the northwestern parts of the Northern Territory receiving some good rainfalls, as are the far northern parts of the Kimberley. That area around the Pilbara now receiving more rainfall, as that broad area of low pressure is located in there. Remember, we looked at that and said Friday and then Saturday and particularly then Sunday, as that low pushes offshore, it may have some potential of forming into a TC. One thing we didn't mention yet, and we're not going to mention too much tonight, but we will in our future updates, with this tropical cyclone over Queensland, we will need to monitor. There are king tides as we head towards Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and even Saturday. There are some very, very high tides here, and it will depend. We can see these onshore winds pushing onto the coast here at anywhere from 35 to 50 knots, depending on where you are on the coast or the islands. So there is the potential there for storm surge, and going to be a fairly higher potential than normal, just because of the already very high tides. But we'll talk more about that, and we'll talk about the timing of that and the timing of landfall once the track becomes more certain, because at the moment the track is still uncertain. Alright folks, thanks for watching tonight. We'll talk again tomorrow. Good night.